House of EdTech, episode 85.
Hey, this is Tom Murray from the Alliance for Excellent Education, and you are listening to the House of EdTech with Chris Nesi.
Support for this episode of the House of EdTech comes from my awesome supporters. Many thanks to Jeff Herb, Peggy George, Mark Grindell, Brent Warner, Dan Gallagher, and Jen Giffen. If you want to become an awesome supporter of the podcast, go to chrisnesi.com/awesome.
Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Christopher Nesi, and the House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. My objectives include discussing technology that is changing our classrooms and schools and sharing tools and tips that you can hear about today and use tomorrow. I talk to teachers, leaders, and creators just like you and have them share their stories. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way we teach and how our students learn.
Hey, welcome back inside the House of EdTech. This, once again, is episode number 85, and the countdown is still on. 15 to go until we hit the magic 100. And as I just learned recently, the 100th episode of a podcast is the equivalent of graduating high school. So we are almost there, folks. If this is your first episode listening to the podcast, thank you so much for making the House of EdTech a part of your podcast PD, which is obviously your anytime, anywhere, on-the-go learning. And actually, that could be my small plug for the other podcast that I co-host, which is called Podcast PD with Stacy Lindis and AJ Bianco. If you're not listening to that, we are 6 episodes into our run, and we would love to have you check out that podcast as well, which can be found at podcastpd.com/subscribe, and then you can add it to your podcatcher of choice. And we would absolutely love to have you listening to that show. So what's coming up in this episode of the House of EdTech? I've got my EdTech thought, where I'm going to talk about staying focused and not being overwhelmed by technology. I have an EdTech recommendation, where I will share a simple tool that will save you and your students time when working with images. And my featured content this episode, I want to be an innovative teaching and learning specialist. Of course, I have a House of EdTech VIP as well, because no episode of the podcast is complete until I tell you somebody awesome that you need to go follow on Twitter and connect with. Now, if you're listening to this episode before May 20th, 2017, and you can get to TCT 2017, and TCT stands for Tomorrow's Classrooms Today, I will be presenting a session titled Your School Needs a Podcast, a House of EdTech How-To. And I would love to meet up with you and say hello. Hopefully you'd come to my session and learn about podcasting and how you can bring it to your school or your school district. You can get more information on TCT by visiting evolvingeducators.com. And of course, there will be a link in the show notes. And if you're listening to this after May 20th, hey, sorry, you missed one heck of a presentation. And now, my EdTech thought. For this episode's EdTech thought, I want to share with you 7 things to consider that can help you stay focused and not be overwhelmed by technology. This is inspired by the Crew blog, which can be found at crew.co, and that's crew.co. So let me ask you this. As an educator, how many things are vying for your attention right now? Your phone, email, Slack, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, that nagging to-do list that just seems to keep growing? Modern technology has given us so many amazing things, but one of the awkward side effects has always been its ability to get in our face whether we want it to or not. Losing focus is easy, and I mean really easy. It's getting back on track that's the hard part. Yet, despite knowing the dangers of distraction, we do very few things to protect ourselves from it. Let's change that. Our brains are always on and taking in information, which means it constantly has to choose what to pay attention to and what to filter out. Neuroscientists call this, quote, selective attention, end quote, and it comes in two different forms. The first is top-down or voluntary focus, and top-down focus is goal-oriented. It's responsible for seeing the bigger picture and uses your past experiences to figure things out. When does this happen? Students are studying for an exam, or we're trying to solve a difficult problem. The other is called bottom-up or stimulus-driven focus, and this is when a thought creeps up on you or something around you grabs your attention, like a ping, a bing, or a notification on your phone. You're suffering from bottom-up focus. You can't help but pay attention to what's happening. This happens when you hear a loud noise, someone pops out of the bushes, or your phone buzzes and you get, again, a notification. Here are some helpful tips to keep in mind the next time you are having trouble keeping your thoughts in order. Number 1, work within your brain's natural schedule. Try not to be doing things late at night, and as much as I would love to say, hey, do things early, maybe you're not a morning person, maybe doing things too early is having a negative impact on you. Figure out what works for you in terms of when you're at your best. Maybe it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe it's 11 o'clock in the morning. You need to determine that for yourself. Number 2, reward your mind for staying focused. Set goals, give yourself breaks to check your phone, check email, go on Slack, veg out on Facebook for a few minutes. Don't totally strip yourself of things that, in a sense, you do enjoy doing that are needed. Sometimes distraction is a good thing, and when you come back to a task, you'll be more focused. Which brings me to take breaks. And when I say take breaks, take real breaks. Stop what you're doing, stop what you're actually focusing on, and do something completely different. That's going to help reset your brain and reset your focus. Number 4, forget multitasking. All I'm going to say is we can't actually do it. Number 5, find work that keeps you genuinely engaged. And also find a time to do it. If you're the kind of teacher who loves to lesson plan, find the best time to lesson plan. Maybe you love lesson planning, but 8 o'clock on a Sunday night is not the best time to do it. Maybe you want to get to bed early. Maybe you're anxious about the week. Put yourself in a position to be successful and do the things that you want to do when it's good for you. Number 6, practice mindfulness. Sometimes you just have to relax. I'm actually looking forward to having an episode coming up that is going to be dedicated completely to mindfulness in education. But we'll get to that when we get to that future episode. Number 7, very simply, and actually I'm looking at it right here, chew gum. I'm not chewing gum while I record the podcast, of course, but I do have an old school pack of bubble yum right here in the House of EdTech. And I've actually employed this recently on some late nights where I'm up doing some work. I just pop in a piece of gum, and it actually helps me stay focused and keeps my mind focused, on track. And because it's bubble yum, I can blow really big bubbles. And who doesn't like to blow bubbles? Now I'm looking forward to popping in a piece of bubble yum after I'm done recording this episode and editing this episode. But before I leave this EdTech thought, I also put a call out to the Facebook group, which you're only going to find out about right here on the show. So if you're not a part of the House of EdTech Facebook group, go to chrisnessy.com/Facebook. And I put this question out to the members of the group. And here are some of the responses. Megan Forbes, a recent guest of the podcast, an awesome YouTuber, said that it's a blessing in disguise when her phone tends to be on low battery by the time she gets home from work. She puts it in the bedroom, and then she has a tech-free evening with family. And I replied to that by saying, for the last few years when I didn't have a smartphone, my phone basically just sat in my car on the charger, and I didn't even bother bringing it in the house because it wasn't a distraction. Now I have a smartphone. It's still not a distraction, so I'm better with that. Casey Bell from the Google Teacher Tribe podcast, which I produce, and obviously former guest of the show, and you can check her out at shakeuplearning.com. She simply said, turn off your email notifications and really only check things, once or twice a day. Dan Gallagher agreed with Casey, and I'm really just taking you through the thread here on Facebook. Nate Nagel commented that important to-dos go on the whiteboard on his fridge. He puts the time of day restrictions on his phone so that it doesn't give notifications
or sounds during certain parts of his day. And he said that, quote, if I find that I really need a break or that I can't focus, I will block my device's MAC address on the router so that it cannot connect. That's a good tip. Just disconnect your device. I like that. And Ryan Mitchell said that he is still working on this. It is hard to do. Hey, I am with you, Ryan. It is very hard to disconnect and really be intentional. And Ryan says it's best to be intentional and leave it in another room or inside if we are outside. And I can't agree more. And again, if you're not a member of the House of EdTech Facebook group, go to chrisnessy.com/Facebook, and I would love to chat with you and connect with you over there. And that's my EdTech thought. For this episode's House of EdTech recommendation, I'd like to recommend I Love IMG. This can be found at iloveimage.com, and that's ILOVEIMG.com. And I Love IMG is the simplest way to save time while working with images. I Love IMG lets you modify images in bulk, fast. Everything you need for compressing, cropping, converting, and resizing is right there. You can even make animated GIFs, and yes, I say GIF, in just a few clicks. Check out I Love IMG again at iloveimg.com. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment in the show notes. And that is this episode's recommendation. For this episode's featured content, and again, the title of the episode, I Want to Be an Innovative Teaching and Learning Specialist. This is inspired by a recent blog post by George Couros titled, It is Time to Move Away from the Idea of Tech Leads. And if you're not familiar with George Couros, he is currently a, quote, innovative teaching, learning, and leadership consultant. He is the author of The Innovator's Mindset, and there will be a link to that book in the show notes if you haven't read it or picked it up yet. And George is formerly a principal in Stony Plain, Alberta, Canada, with over 17 years of experience as an educator. He's passionate about leadership and believes that creating a collaborative environment with all stakeholders will help ensure that we meet the needs of all our children. And I can't agree with that mindset any more than I already do, so we're just going to roll with it. But I recently read this post from May 2nd, 2017, and I have a couple of quotes that I pulled here and my reaction to it. There will be a link to the full blog post in the show notes over at chrisnessy.com/85. But let's jump right in. So George says, quote, for many people that have a quote-unquote technology in their title, no matter the role, it means to other people, quote, please come fix things in my classroom that use electricity. I say, you know what? Bring it on. I've met so many tech specialists that are actually quite bad at their jobs, which is even more frustrating to not be in the role myself. And when I say bad, I mean they actually don't know what they're doing, or they only know like one thing, and they really lack diversity in their skill set as a tech coach or, you know, whatever their title is. Personally, I have a can-do attitude, and I'm always willing to help my colleagues with anything they need. The more I do, the more I learn. And the last time I checked, knowledge, along with experience, is still pretty valuable. So I have no problem when a teacher comes to me and says, hey, Mr. Nessy, can you reconnect the audio in my room? Sure. You know, I will do anything that teachers ask me to help them, because it's one less thing they have to worry about, and then they can focus their attention on their students and creating the type of environment they're looking to create. So whatever I can help them with, you know, I'm willing to help. The next thing George says in this post is, quote, another concern is that when technology is in the title of a position that is not about IT, it almost forces you to find ways to use technology in a classroom setting, whether good or bad. Go to a conference and someone uses Kahoot in a session, and then suddenly you have Kahoot parties popping up all over your school.
Is this leading to deeper learning, or simply using technology more in classrooms for the sake of justifying a position? This kills me, and this is me speaking. I agree that there is an overuse at times, and even an overdependence on technology by some tech specialists. Now, sure, you're listening to a podcast called The House of EdTech with a guy who loves education, loves technology, wants to integrate it, and is all about the tech and what it can do for instruction. But if you've never heard me say what I'm about to say, here we go. I do firmly believe that technology does not have to be used every single day in every single lesson. I don't do that myself. Even if you're one-to-one, there's still a place for pencil and paper in your classroom and more analog activities that will provide a lot of meaning to you and your students. So you can't just be, what's the next tool? Well, what can I be an ambassador for? What can I get stickers for and give out stickers and just promote and sell. That's not what this is all about. Now, George mentions the idea of of the innovative teaching and learning specialist, which is more the route that we should be going when it comes to crossing technology and curriculum. An ITL would assist teachers' integration of technology, but more importantly, an ITL would work to improve instruction. Obviously, I would love to be in a position like this. So if you want to hire me as an ITL, go to chrisnessy.com/feedback and we could chat. But ultimately, this is going to help us make an impact on students and teachers when it's not just somebody who is all about the tech, but somebody who is all about improving instruction. Technology just feeds into that. So again, if you know someone who needs a guy like me, send them my way. And now it's time for this episode's House of EdTech VIP. Congratulations to Julie Daniel Davis. Julie is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Julie is a wife, mom, tech coordinator, and a Bama fan. She's the co-moderator of hashtag Tennessee EdChat, which is hashtag TN EdChat. And she's also a member of EdCamp Gig City. She was named a top 50 K-12 IT blogger in 2015. So obviously you need to check out Julie's blog at techhelpful.blogspot.com. And of course, as with all the VIPs here on the show, you need to connect with Julie on Twitter. Tell her I sent you. And she is on Twitter at JulieDavisEDU. And there will be a link to her blog and her Twitter in the show notes for this episode over at chrisnessy.com/85. So Julie Daniel Davis, congratulations. It was great to meet you at ISTE 2015, and I hope we'll get to cross paths again in the future. It's not going to be in San Antonio, but hopefully sometime soon. And again, congratulations. You are a House of EdTech VIP. Well, I've learned that if I don't have a guest, these episodes are much shorter. So perhaps there'll be more of me and less guests, but I do like talking to people, and I do have some conversations lined up for the future. So there will be more what I deem full-length episodes coming your way here on the House of EdTech. Thank you for checking out this episode of the podcast. Again, if this is your first time, go dive back into the archives. This is episode 85, and of course, I apologize for the first 84. Now let's keep the conversation going. Visit the show notes for this episode at chrisnessy.com/85. Over there, you can leave a comment on the blog post for this episode, or you can send me a message by going to chrisnessy.com/feedback. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on the information and resources that I shared in this episode. And, if you listen to an old episode, send me your comments and feedback on that one too. I would love to share your thoughts here on the show. Now, if we're not connected on Twitter, we should be. It's the fastest way to connect with me. I am Mr. Nessie on Twitter at MR, N as in Nancy, ESI. and just use the hashtag HouseOfEdTech, so I am sure to see your tweets about the show. That would be fantastic. I would love to be Twitter buddies with you. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, or if you have ever found value in anything I've done here on the show, do me two things. One, tell somebody else about the podcast. Tell somebody on Twitter and tag me and use the hashtag. That'd be fantastic because word of mouth is the best way to share a great podcast that you love. Number two, you can rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Your rating and honest review will help keep the House of EdTech front and center for others to discover and enjoy. And I'd like to give a shout out to Tina Monteleone, who's a great Jersey educator and friend of mine. She recently reviewed the podcast and said, quote, "Who better to spend my weekly commute with than Chris Nessie? Chris and his House of EdTech fill my mind with thought-provoking ideas, great new EdTech tips, and teaching strategies from amazing educators from all over the country. Chris and his commentary never disappoint. Thanks, Chris, for keeping it real. And thank you, Tina, for reviewing the show on iTunes. I really, really appreciate it." The next episode of the House of EdTech, number 86, is going to be released on May 21st, 2017. Until next time, thank you for learning with me. And remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try. The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hi, this is Richard Lee from the podcast and vodcast called Short Films Teachers Love. I've got to say, I'm really honoured to be part of the Education Podcast Network. Did you know that 4 of the podcasts in our network are in the top 200 education podcasts on iTunes? That's pretty impressive. Have a look at edupodcastnetwork.com for more details.